Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, earlier today, there was a ray of hope that maybe some resolution could be found to the Libyan crisis. This after Libyan President Gaddafi and Arab League President agreed on the chances of a peace plan being put forward by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. That, in fact, helped oil come off its peak prices by a few dollars. But that decline was soon reversed as Libyan militaries learned to have launched fresh airstrikes in East Libya in an attempt to retake the town of Brega. For a view on how the situation is going to develop over the course of the next few days, we're now joined by Katerina Dalacoura, lecturer at the London School of Economics. She's been studying international relations in the Middle East, Iran and Egypt, and is a specialist in that region. Ms. Dalacoura, thank you very much for your time. Let me start by asking you to assess what you make of the Arab League secretary saying that a peace plan for Libya from Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez was in fact under consideration. It was the big news earlier today.
I think the idea of Venezuela in fact interfering in the conflict is a very far-fetched one. Gaddafi is making a political point by bringing to the attention of the world that he has some allies in the world, and Hugo Chavez is one of them. So it's not going to have much practical significance. It's going to have a political sloganeering significance. Now, the Arab League itself may be a better positioned player in trying to find some negotiated settlement in this dispute.
All right, I want to come to the issue of regional or international intervention in just a bit. But before that, a little more on this peace plan. Now, it seems Al Jazeera was broadcasting that Chavez's plan would involve maybe a commission from Latin America, Europe and the Middle East to try and reach a negotiated outcome between the between Gaddafi and the rebel forces. But it also said that the chairman of the rebels, that is the National Libyan Council, rejected any talks with Gaddafi. So whether it's a Venezuelan proposed peace plan or a peace plan, let's say, proposed by any other political allies that Gaddafi wants to show off about, what are the chances of it having any success, considering that the rebels seem dead set against any form or any sort of negotiation?
Yes, I think even the government of Libya, Gaddafi's government, to my mind appears to be unwilling to negotiate at this stage. It is still extremely early in this conflict to be talking about negotiation in that sense. I think both sides are still sizing up their respective forces, and what we have to see in the next few days and weeks is the extent to which one side can predominate over the other. I think persuasion will perhaps, or the attempt to persuade one side or the other, will come a bit later after the struggle for power has been worked out.
Why do you,
in the first instance?
Why do you assess that this is extremely early in the conflict? Currently, across the world, people are hoping that the conflict will come to an end very soon, and you say this could only be the beginning.
Well, it seems to me that the inability of the rebels to prevail on the western side of Libya, and possibly also the inability of the government to prevail on the eastern side, which is now separate, means that we will have a standoff between the two sides, and standoffs take a while to resolve themselves, if you see what I mean.
Hillary Clinton is quoted as saying that Libya is descending into chaos and becoming another Somalia. What are the chances that this situation will deteriorate into a full-fledged civil war?
It's a difficult question. At the moment, what we have is the government trying to reimpose, or hoping at some point to reimpose, order in parts of the country which have been resisting that. So we have not yet reached the stage of civil war. Civil war is when a country in itself is divided, when the people supporting the government side or whoever are ready to take up arms and lose their lives on their behalf. This may happen, but we have not, I think, reached that stage yet.
Many are standing hours
I'm not
outside
precluding
banks to collect
altogether the
a
possibility that there will be
$400
negotiated
Desperate
settlement at
attempt
the
to buy
moment, but
support
it seems
before
to
the
me
chaos
that
strikes.
Venezuela is not
Everyone here
best
seems to
placed
expect civil
to
war, and
achieve
the
it.
All right. There are two questions I have based on your response. First is, what do you think could push this into a civil war? Because we are seeing armed rebel militia on one side and government forces on the other. And this has now become a full-fledged attack between the two sides. You already spoke of the division between the eastern and western side. So that's one question. And secondly, I would like to ask you, if it's not Venezuela, then what kind of intervention do you see happening? But let's go with the first one first.
I'm not fully aware about the kinds of armaments and the kinds of equipment that the rebels have at their disposal. I think, to be honest, no one at the moment knows exactly what's happening in those countries, and we do not know to what extent these rebels will be armed, perhaps by alternative forces, and that will of course create a longer term conflict. So that's why I'm saying it's still very early days. We do not know how this will work out in the future. In terms of negotiation, yes, it is possible, but it will, in my view at the moment, it will be in the context of the situation as it develops, in the same way as it develops at the moment. What I mean by that is that I think that it's already been apparent that talk of a no-fly zone, which would be one first element in military intervention from outside, has been shot down, both by Europe and by members of NATO, and more importantly by the United States. So we're seeing all kinds of measures being taken against Gaddafi by the international community, but not a willingness to use force in order to determine the situation in Libya. And that, I think, is the key issue that we're witnessing at the moment, an unwillingness to go very much further than taking steps that have to do with freezing assets and taking Gaddafi to the International Criminal Court.
If it's not Venezuela that could help foster some form of peace plan, do you think it could be, in fact, the Arab League itself that might have some more success in being able to foster a peace plan? Because, as you pointed out, several Western powers, and in fact not just Western powers, Russia, China, they're all very hesitant to get involved in any sort of armed fashion at this point in time, and military intervention is almost absolutely being ruled out.
Well, the Arab League could be one. Of course, Gaddafi has had very troubled relations with the Arab League, but nevertheless, it could come in at this very delicate and difficult stage and offer its good offices. I think a regional response, it may be the Arab League, it may be the response by another state or a combination of states, not necessarily in the form or forum of the Arab League, could be better placed to negotiate a settlement between the two sides. But again, I want to emphasize that, in my view, this is still too early, and we have to wait for the balance of forces, the balance of power, to become a bit more apparent before making judgments about the possibility of negotiated settlement.
Ms. Dalacoura, I understand it is a difficult situation to assess from the outside, but I must ask, do you expect this will take a few months to resolve, or do you think that we might in fact finish all of 2011 and still have no resolution on the Libyan front?
I think prediction is extremely difficult, and I would want to avoid it. The reason I want to avoid it is because I think we have been proven time and again completely wrong in trying to assess how things will go in the Middle East in the last few weeks. It seems to me, however, just to attempt to answer your question, a very difficult situation to resolve at the moment. What is going to happen to resolve that situation? One possibility would be that the Gaddafi government would determine to use very brutal force, because that's what it will take, to recapture the regions that it has lost. And that is going to be extremely bloody and difficult, but that could be one way in which the situation will resolve itself. So I think standoff for the moment for quite a few weeks and months. And the possibility of a bloody end to this is, I think, very likely.
I must ask you, you're also an expert on Egypt. We've seen, well, not exactly the similar situation, but we've seen a citizen uprising in Tunisia, in Egypt, and now what seems to be maybe a peaceful transition, hopefully, to a democratic form of government, whether it takes 6 months or a year. What do you make of the developments across the Middle East, across West Asia right now? Because in other countries, for instance, in Bahrain, the protests continue. In several other countries, the protests continue, and the Libyan situation, like you said, is still in its early days and is already looking very bloody.
Well, it seems to me that except for Libya, the situation is at hand in the region for the moment. In Tunisia and Egypt, that's for the reason that I've just explained, the existence of strong state institutions and well-formed opposition groups and civil society groups. So we do not have a situation of chaos, even where we have seen regime change. In respect to the other parts of the Middle East, I would envisage that the current situation and the challenges that governments have faced will lead to change. It will lead to some degree of opening up of political systems, some greater representativeness and accountability of those systems, possibly greater respect for freedoms of speech, association, civil liberties, the abolition of torture, all of these issues which have been so profoundly problematic in the region as a whole. So I expect that there will be some movement in all those directions. However, I do not think that at the moment there is a revolution going on in the region. I think there's been a momentous event in the overthrow of Ben Ali in Tunisia and Mubarak in Egypt, even more so. But I think we're not witnessing revolutions at the moment. We're witnessing civil insurrections leading to regime change, and that's going to impact the region, but not completely transform it.
All right, it could also mean that this insurrection is a long-drawn one as it spreads across the region. Well, Katerina